Good morning, team. Welcome back. Long time no see. We'll get right into it. I'll ask the committee coordinator to call the roll.
Councillor Curry.
Here.
Councillor Devine.
Here.
Councillor Hill.
Present.
Councillor Johnson.
Here.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Present.
Councillor King.
Here.
Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Councillor Lowe.
Here.
Councillor Luloff. Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Vice Chair Kelly.
Present.
Vice Chair Carr.
Here.
Chair Menard.
Present.
Chair Brown.
Here.
You have quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And again, good morning to all. I'd just like to thank Vice Chair Carr for not adjusting the height of the seat. I was able to sit right down and it was great. Confirmation of minutes from the joint ARAC and Environment Committee meeting minutes 1 from the 17th of June 2024. Are those confirmed? Thank you. We'll go right into item 4.1, the water rate structure review, and we do have staff here with the presentation, so I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Brown, and good morning, everyone, members of Environment and members of ARAC. Before I pass it over to Joseph and team, I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you to both Chair Brown for ARAC and Chair Menard for Environment Committee. This is an important report that we've been working on for quite some time, and it shows a strong collaboration in terms of the uniqueness that we have here in the City of Ottawa. We always talk about how unique we are in terms of the urban, the suburban, and the rural area. And what we've been doing in this review is really looking at the uniqueness of that and working closely with, both ARAC and the Environment Committee to ensure that we listened and we heard. There was a strong public engagement and even a strong collaboration across multiple departments in the City of Ottawa. So this rate structure review, started well before 2016. The current structure has been in place since then. And we were directed to go away and continue to review that structure and come back with different scenarios in terms of recommendations of how we look at this overall rate program. There's been a strong collaboration within the city with Public Works, Infrastructure Services, and across finance, many different areas within finance. And today we're at that point where we're coming back with a presentation with all of those findings. So another big thanks to Joseph and the team. So Joseph, Karen, and Diane will walk you through a presentation and we'll be happy to take questions after that. So over to you, Joseph.
Merci, Monsieur le Président et chers membres du comité. Je suis ici en compagnie de Diane Lawson et Karen Fitzpatrick pour présenter l'examen du barème des redevances d'eau et les recommandations finales. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. I'm here with Diane Lawson and Karen Fitzpatrick to present on the water rate structure review and the final recommendations. Next slide, please. In 2016, Council approved the current rate structure, but directed staff to review the stormwater rate structure when impervious data was readily available. In that report, staff also committed to periodic reviews of the water and wastewater structure. In December 2023, Council approved a report directing staff to review the existing rate structure and develop a stormwater structure that considers impervious area as a basis for fee calculation. Council approved the guiding principles and a review framework for the water, wastewater, and stormwater rate structures, and staff were directed to begin consultation with public and stakeholders to develop final recommendations on a revised rate structure and report back to committee in 2025. Staff held robust public consultations during 2024 and developed options for revised rate structures. Over the last few months, staff socialized various options with councillors and major stakeholders for additional feedback. All feedback received was then reviewed and consolidated to inform the development of the rate structure recommendations we're presenting here today. If the report recommendations are approved today, staff will commence an 18-month implementation process, culminating in a communication and education campaign in Q1 2027, and a rollout in Q2 2027. Next slide, please. Council approved the following six key principles to guide the rate structure review. Number one, fairness and equity. Developing a rate structure that ensures that services paid for reflect the benefit received, and one that improves equity in stormwater billing distribution. Number two, affordability. Develop a rate structure that ensures that basic water consumption remains accessible to all residents. Number three, transparency. Develop a rate structure that aligns with industry best practices to provide clarity for the public and ease of administration for the city. Number four, financial sustainability. Developing a rate structure that aims to recover full operational costs while maintaining infrastructure in good repair and ensuring sufficient fixed cost recovery. Number five, supporting economic development. Developing a rate structure that keeps Ottawa's rates competitive with similar Ontario municipalities. And finally, promotion of conservation. Developing a rate structure that encourages the reduction of impervious surface and water consumption to effectively manage system demand. Next slide, please. To ensure a comprehensive and inclusive review, we held extensive public consultations. A citywide survey was conducted from February to the end of July 2024, receiving nearly 40,000 responses, which provided key insights into public concerns and priorities. Between May and June of 2024, 4 in-person community engagement sessions were held in the 5 rural wards, with approximately 700 participants. Additionally, sector-specific meetings took place from July through October of 2024, involving representatives from small businesses, large commercial enterprises, educational and healthcare institutions, not-for-profits, multi-residential stakeholders, and federal organizations. Using the feedback received from the public and the stakeholders, staff have developed revised rate structure options that are aligned with the review's guiding principles to ensure a stable, equitable funding model for water, wastewater, and stormwater services. Next slide, please. Here, I would like to highlight the 5 key takeaways from the 2025 rate structure review. First, the proposed rate structure is a fair and equitable solution that recognizes Ottawa's unique geographical situation. From dense urban neighborhoods to sparse rural regions, and tailors the rate structure accordingly for a customized Ottawa solution. Second, this rate structure review was deeply informed by public input. We conducted extensive consultations with residents, stakeholders, and rural communities, and their feedback played a pivotal role in shaping our recommendations here today. Third, the overall impact of the new rate structure is modest. Residential customers will see an average 2% decrease. The average multi-residential bill remains unchanged, and the average non-residential customer will see a 5% increase. This means that bills for residents remain largely stable. Fourth, this rate structure recommends a made-in-Ottawa roadside ditch funding model that addresses ditching concerns raised in the 2024 Rural Summit. By establishing a rural ditch maintenance levy, we are addressing equity and transparency while recognizing the difference in infrastructure and service needs. Finally, implementation of this rate structure is planned for Q2 of 2027, with a robust communication and education campaign kicking off in early 2027 to ensure residents and stakeholders are well informed and supported through the transition. Next slide, please. I'll now pass this over to Kieran.
Thanks, Joseph. I must stress that the proposed rate structure changes being made today bring no additional revenue to the city. Je dois souligner que le changement proposé au barème de redevance n'apportant pas de revenus supplémentaires à la ville. Instead, the distribution will change to reflect better the benefit received from the service, but the total collected revenue will remain the same. Some properties will increase while others will decrease, but the city will not get any new money from these changes. When we look at the overall impacts on tax and water bills, Implementing these recommendations will have no impact on the average multi-residential property. Residential properties will see a 2% decrease overall, and the average non-residential property will see a modest increase of 5%. From a different perspective, 89% of properties would experience an impact within plus or minus 10%, 6% would see a greater discount, and only 5% would face an increase of more than 10%. Next slide, please. This graph illustrates cumulative account and water consumption growth. The number of accounts has grown by about 70% from 1998 to 2024. However, despite almost doubling our water accounts, total water consumption has decreased by around 9% since then, with periods where consumption fell as much as 15% below 1998 levels. This trend highlights the success of conservation efforts and a decline in per-account water usage. With 80% of the city's water and wastewater revenue tied to variable consumption-based fees, this creates financial instability. A billing model dependent on declining and unpredictable consumption makes it difficult for staff to set reliable budgets, increasing financial risk, and limiting the city's ability to fund critical infrastructure and service delivery. Next slide, please. Before discussing the proposed water and wastewater rate structure, I'd like to outline 3 overarching recommendations. First, we recommend consolidating fire supply charges. The goal is to simplify the rate structure and improve transparency for ratepayers. Fire protection costs are already integrated into the overall water system, so this change aligns with best practices observed in other municipalities and removes unnecessary complexity from the water bill. Second, we propose increasing the amount collected from fixed charges from 20 to 35%. This shift supports greater financial stability, which is particularly important as consumption declines while fixed costs grow. Importantly, public opinion supports this direction. Our citywide survey revealed that account holders generally favored increasing fixed charges when informed about the financial and infrastructure challenges facing the city. By maintaining 65% variable costs, we continue to encourage responsible water use and allow some users some control over their water bill. Lastly, we recommend rebalancing fixed and variable charges across all customer types. The objective is to ensure that all users are charged a similar proportion of fixed charges on their bill and an overall cost per cubic meter, regardless of account type or meter size. The change also ensures that increased fixed charges do not disproportionately impact lower consuming residential users. This balance is key to promoting both equity and efficiency in the rate structure. Next slide, please. Building on the overarching recommendations, the proposed made-to-measure model is the result of a comprehensive review of rate structures from across Ontario, Canada, and North America. City staff evaluated a range of options to ensure the proposed structure is competitive, equitable, and responsive to the unique needs of different customer types. To reflect diverse consumption patterns of residential, multi-residential, and non-residential users, the recommended model applies 3 separate but simplified tier structures. Starting with residential customers, we've maintained an inclining tier structure to encourage conservation. However, we've increased Tier 1 to cover usage up to 15 cubic meters over a 30-day period, capturing the average household's consumption within the lowest cost tier. This encourages property owners to consume below the city average. For multi-residential properties, we use a similar inclining tier structure, but with a Tier 1 threshold set at 250 cubic meters over 30 days. This approach ensures that buildings with up to approximately 30 units will see the majority of their water use fall within Tier 1. Non-residential properties are subject to a declining rate structure. This design helps offset the impact of higher fixed charges, particularly for properties with large meters, and supports economic development by lowering the marginal cost for high-volume users. When we look at the outcomes of implementing the recommendation, we see modest bill impacts for the average customer. An average residential bill sees a slight decrease of 4%, while multi-residential sees a modest increase of 3%, and non-residential bills drop by 2%. At the same time, fixed charges are more appropriately allocated, 36% for residential, 23% for multi-residential, and 39% for non-residential users. And the cost per cubic meter becomes better aligned among the account types. Next slide, please. Staff are also recommending introducing special purpose rates for wholesale water users and bulk fill customers. Wholesale customers like the municipality of Russell use such a large volume of water that they quickly exceed their top tier in the current rate structure, making tiered billing ineffective. Under the current model, 99.9% of Russell's bill is charged at Tier 4. To streamline billing and improve predictability, staff propose a flat per cubic meter rate that combines fixed and variable costs. This rate would be revenue neutral, meaning no change to the customer's average bill. Staff also recommend updates to the Flusher Hydrant program, which provides non-potable water for activities like pool filling and street cleaning. Currently, businesses self-report usage and are billed at the Tier 4 rate plus a 15% administration fee. However, this does not account for wastewater and stormwater impacts when the water returns to the system. To ensure full cost recovery, a 10% surcharge would be added to reflect those impacts, alongside the existing 15% administration fee. I'll now pass this over to Diane.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Now turning to stormwater. Staff recommend the following overarching changes to the stormwater rate structure. The service and type of infrastructure in rural areas differ significantly from those in urban settings. Therefore, staff recommend having unique solutions for urban and rural cost recovery. Staff recommend that the total culvert funding be moved under the roads budget, ensuring all properties contribute to its maintenance through the general tax base. A recommendation is that rural properties fund roadside ditch maintenance via a special area levy to be managed to the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee. Finally, the villages of Manotick, Richmond, and Carp pay a stormwater charge consistent with the urban areas. Next slide, please. Looking now at urban stormwater. After evaluating several options, staff are recommending the blended stormwater rate structure based on impervious area that balances the need for properties to contribute equitably based on their actual impact, while also keeping the billing process administratively efficient and cost-effective. A model based on impervious area ensures that properties pay based on the demand they place on the stormwater system. Under this model, residential and multi-residential properties are grouped into fixed categories and charged a standard per unit rate. This simplifies billing for the majority of properties while still reflecting broad differences in property characteristics. For extra large residential properties, those with more than 500 square meters of impervious area, an exact charge is applied based on the property's specific measured impervious area. This ensures high-impact residential properties pay their fair share. Non-residential properties, which tend to have larger and more variable impervious surfaces, are assessed an exact charge calculated using annual aerial flyover data. A minimum fixed charge is applied for those with less than 15 square meters of impervious area. Next slide, please. In the rural area, staff are proposing a roadside ditch maintenance special area levy because it directly links funding to the necessary maintenance of roadside ditches, which play a critical role in managing rural stormwater runoff. The proposed model would specifically fund roadside ditch maintenance in rural areas through a special area levy rather than the current method based on property type or impervious area measurements. This approach ensures a sustainable revenue source for rural ditch maintenance while fairly distributing costs among rural property owners who benefit from the maintenance of these drainage systems. Here, you'll see how the new levy impacts different property types. Rural residential properties would see a decrease of about 14%, with the typical property paying $90 annually compared to the current rate of $105. Farms, which are currently not paying, would begin contributing, with the average farm assessed at $510,000, seeing a charge of $22 annually. Farms with buildings with mixed residential and farm assessment of $845,000 would see a decrease of 11%. This shift helps to distribute the cost more equitably based on usage and benefit. Assuming this levy was implemented in 2025, it would raise $3.8 million for rural roadside ditch maintenance. Next slide, please. In the rural villages of Manotick, Richmond, and Carp, we are proposing a unique funding model that takes into account their distinct characteristics. When we compare the total impervious area of each of the rural villages of Carp, Manotick, and Richmond against the impervious area within the urban or rural boundaries, we see that the impervious area, as a percentage of the total area, is much more similar to the urban area rather than the rural area. Likewise, when we compare the stormwater pipe density within these three villages against the urban or rural areas, we again see a more comparable density to that in the urban boundary. As a result of these similarities, staff propose that properties within these villages do not pay the roadside ditch maintenance special area levy applied to other rural properties, but rather a village stormwater charge equal to the urban stormwater charge based on impervious surfaces. Next slide, please. This table summarizes the funding sources and governance structures of the three-part solution for roadside ditch maintenance funding. The rural roadside ditch maintenance levy of $3.8 million would remain a special area charge based on property assessment. Citywide contribution of $1.8 million would come from the general tax levy. Manotick, Richmond, and Carp would pay a stormwater charge based on impervious area. However, in addition to the stormwater infrastructure within these villages, roadside ditch networks also exist, and $78,000 from the stormwater charges collected will be allocated to the rural roadside ditch maintenance levy. This brings the total rural roadside ditch maintenance allocation to $5.68 million. Roadside ditches also exist in parts of the urban area. Staff recommend that an additional $1.045 million be allocated from the urban stormwater charges to urban ditching program funding. This model provides a locally tailored, made-in-Ottawa solution to roadside ditch maintenance. Next slide, please. To assess the effectiveness of each rate model and determine which best aligned with our guiding principles and review framework, staff conducted a comprehensive impact analysis from multiple perspectives. The first step was to evaluate how the proposed rate structures affected the average residential user, as well as those in the lower consumption brackets, the 25th percentile, low residential user, and the 10th percentile, very low residential user. The made-to-measure model ensures that the average residential user paid a fair balance between fixed and variable charges. Additionally, this model provides relief to lower consumption users by reducing their overall fixed charges, reinforcing affordability, and rewarding conservation. Next slide, please. I'll now pass this back to Joseph.
Thank you very much, Diane. Implementing the new rate structure will take about 21 months and involve several activities. Staff will first finalize the rate models using updated impervious surface and consumption data. They will also work with internal teams and software vendors to modify the water and tax billing systems to support these new structures. A comprehensive public education communication campaign will be launched in Q1 of 2027, including digital resources, mailers, and a dedicated webpage to help residents understand and navigate the changes prior to the launch in Q2 of 2027. Next slide, please. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate the 5 key takeaways from the 2025 rate structure review. First, the proposed rate structure is a customized and fair and equitable solution that recognizes Ottawa's unique geography. Second, this rate structure review was deeply informed by public input through an extensive consultation. Third, the overall impact of the new rate structure is modest, and this means that bills for residents remain largely stable. Fourth, this rate structure recommends a made-in-Ottawa roadside ditch funding model that addresses ditching concerns raised in the 2024 Rural Summit. Finally, this rate structure will be implemented in Q2 of 2027 following a robust communication and education campaign. Thank you, Chair. This is the end of our presentation.
Thank you very much. We'll move to public delegations. We have Courtney Argue and Angela Keller-Herzog. So I'll ask Ms. Argue to come back to the table. And while Courtney makes her way to the table, I did forget to ask if there were any declarations of interest. I know I'm interested, but if anyone has a declaration of interest, you can state it now. Thank you, Councillor. I am punny. So Ms. Argue, when you're ready, you can go ahead.
Can you hear me? Perfect. Thank you. So I'm Courtney. I spoke at the last meeting. I just wanted to let you know that George is not joining me in this one because someone told him there was a water fountain in the hallway, so he's gone to find that. So today I'm going to talk about bedrock. So it's really, next slide, please. So bedrock is actually a really common sight in West Carleton in Ward 5. We see vast amounts of it in areas, including in some village areas as well. We can see this natural feature occurring. Rock is considered an impervious surface area. However, rock can make a great home, which is really interesting. Okay, next slide. The answer is to moss. So Mother Nature has done a great job with stormwater drainage, even on an impervious surface area. And fun facts here is that, did you know that moss can absorb contaminants such as lead? There is some studies out there that have mentioned that they have proof of doing that. And did you know that some moss can absorb up to 20 to 30 times of their own mass, which is incredible. Just a tiny little organism that can do its own stormwater drainage. Next slide, please. So show and tell. So again, I always bring fun things to council, whatever gets through the security there. So I went out and I'm gonna show kind of you guys. So this is all moss from our farm, for example. And so I collected enough moss here that would demonstrate, and thank you, Hank, my horse, for lending me his water bucket this morning. He is famous on West Carleton Online, our local our local paper. So this amount of moss can absorb this amount of water, believe it or not. So it actually, where you think that rock is an impervious surface, it can actually prove that it's not, or it is, sorry, it's not. And that it actually does have natural organisms that can help with stormwater drainage. Next slide. So considerations. So we can't punish residents with taxes for the presence of natural features. We need to be aware of this. Yes, you know, paving a driveway, that does increase in impervious surfaces. However, you know, I can't do anything about what the glacier did millions of years ago, right? So it is something to be mindful of when we're writing policies. Also, just again, Mother Nature's adapted to deal with stormwater on bedrock. She's a mighty force, especially we know that as residents in Dunrobin, we've had derecos, we've had tornadoes, we've had floods, everything you can name we've had. So we need to respect Mother Nature's mighty forces. Again, bringing the rural lens for infrastructure, so valuing our bedrock areas for their ability to manage stormwater and consider impervious surfaces areas for new construction. So this is really key. So especially when we have vendors coming that are, you know, looking to use some of our lands and, you know, putting solid surfaces over 10 acres of land in an area that is known to flood. That is really, can be really detrimental. So we do need to keep in mind how can we keep those impervious surfaces down in the city of Ottawa. Next slide, please. So stormwater drainage is unique in rural areas. And like I think I read in the last presentation, that you guys are trying to look at it in a unique way, which is really amazing. It doesn't mean we don't have more work to do, but I think that it's a great step. So, you know, keeping in mind the natural features is really key. And again, I just like to pull from the Rural Summit because I hold it close to my heart because I think it's really important for rural folk in Ottawa. from Mark Sutcliffe, moving away from one-size-fits-all model to address diverse rural needs. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you very much for your delegation. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming out. Angela, no stranger to the committee table. Welcome.
Hi there. Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. So my presentation this time around is going to be quite focused. So I'm only focusing on the stormwater management issues, and with particularly a climate lens, which doesn't come as a surprise to the committee, I'm sure. Next slide, please. I think you are familiar with cafes. We're a local environmental network. Next slide, please. So that gives the overview of the presentation, and I'll dive right in. Next slide, please. So the context for stormwater, and this is familiar to you councillors, we are facing an increasing overland flooding risk due to climate change. The reports that we have jointly done with NCC project increased intensity of rainfall, which is going to cause trouble and cost. Floods at this point are more costly than fires, and municipalities are crucial in flood prevention through stormwater management. Next slide, please. So then in terms of the main issues that I'd like to raise, there are 4. First of all, a big bravo. This shift to the impervious surface area metrics, like doing this like structural change in how we do our rate assessment, this is no mean feat. And I'm really happy that like change is possible in these things. We're not stuck, and we are also using new technology to do this. So we are very supportive, and we are impressed, and we understand that structural changes are difficult, and we also recognize that administrative considerations are important and need to enter into the recommendations, right? It needs to be administratively manageable and tractable. However, we do want to point out, and I'll come back to this more, that the blended option is not based on direct impervious surface metrics for the urban residential rate setting. Next slide. So the second issue is the definition of impervious. Harking back to a public delegation that cafes through Jake Morrison made in November 2023, there's the issue of whether ground mount solar is considered impervious or not. And we would like to request assurance and clarity that ground mounted solar panels are not considered impervious. Obviously, from a climate change and energy transition perspective, we don't want to put barriers to the energy transition. And there are several projects in the planning stages and they could be hit unsuspectingly if the ground mount solar was considered impervious. Next slide, please. So in terms of the incentives to shift behavior, we can use carrots and we can use sticks. We understand that adaptation to climate change will save us money. And we're seeing that in the proposed regime there, we want to point out this gap in the residential stormwater fee regime, where there is actually no incentive to build better regarding stormwater management. So it's based on the 6 categories. And if you're building a townhouse, if you're like looking at single dwellings, if you're looking at multi-story, that's the category of payment that you're in, and there's no incentive to do better. And this, we feel, is a significant gap, and the proposed regime does not meet its own review framework criteria number 6. But we understand why you've gone where you have gone. Next slide, please. So what we need to keep our eye on is outcomes. So the outcome we want to be working on is residential flood prevention. So which problem are we solving is important. We feel that the report has not actually taken account in terms of the coming climate change and increased intensive rainfall. And we think that taking that into consideration and the cost savings for both city and residents from flood prevention is super important. And next slide, we would recommend that in the context of the coming climate resiliency strategy, that we do consider incentives to encourage green infrastructure, encourage integrated designs for stormwater management, and also to provide credits for on-site stormwater management and reduction of impervious surfaces so that this gap could then be addressed in this coming piece. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angela. Are there any questions for the delegate? Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Angela. In terms of examples out there, are you aware of other municipalities or any place else that is following some of the recommendations that you're putting forward, such as your concern about solar and the panels and the and other incentives or carrots, or I guess that's incentives or carrots or sticks?
Okay, so that's actually a very big question. I am not aware of any other municipality penalizing ground mount solar from a stormwater management impervious area perspective. And I think in part, again, because we are starting to use the new technologies. So this is in some ways like some leading edge, right? That we're going to have the drone surveillance and so forth. So I think that obviously we can fix things later, but I think that to the point where we have time to think about how to define things and what might be better, what might be worse, what might have unintended consequences, our recommendation is to not put additional stormwater charges on ground mount solar plant projects because the economics of the project would then skew. In terms of the second part of your question, I think that different municipalities, say around Ontario, and we can go further around the world, have many, many different what we call all in the big basket of climate action. And incentive structures are tools to change behavior, right? To try to make people shift towards the things that are deemed socially, environmentally desirable versus like things not, right? So we can use incentives, we can use taxes, and from an economist perspective, it's the same thing. So if we want in Ottawa for builders or existing property owners to shift towards more impervious, more water absorbing use of land use, then we need to give them incentives to do that. That's basically the bottom line. That's where the opportunity lies. And I think that this file has been carried by the finance department, but if we talk to the stormwater engineers and the primary concern becomes the water, they are highly appreciative of even like incremental changes of pervious versus impervious.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lowe.
Thanks very much. Your point about narrowing, I guess, the definitions of what an impervious surface is. I know you only mentioned the example of ground-mounted solar panels. Are there any other examples of something that could be read as an impervious surface, but could be more of be more of a benefit overall, like ground-mounted solar?
Absolutely. The other area is there are pervious pavers. right? So you can do your parking lot or your driveway with these pervious pavement stones, and they will absorb water and let water through. And actually, Councillor Devine, whose ward has suffered from overland flooding, has started to take a special interest in that. So he probably knows more about it than I do. But like with the solar panels, if you have these pervious pavers, I think that our drone technology that is trying to figure out what's going on with the surface, that might be a misread. And we would need to have some kind of like exemption mechanism where a property owner who is investing in these pervious pavers would be able to get a rate adjustment.
Okay, by the sounds of it, based on the report, it seems like it's more of an aerial surveillance, like from a plane or something. And I think there is an appeal mechanism as well because a lot of these properties seem to be larger. So still a question for staff. We'll pose it later. I'll pose it later, or someone will. I'm also curious about the solar panel bit. So we'll pose these questions to staff. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and I don't see any other questions, so thank you for coming out, Angela. All right, colleagues, questions to staff, and I'll just note for the clerk's office that Councillor Luloff has joined us. Questions to staff? Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you very much, Chair. In terms of the ditches, there's a lot of talk about the urban versus rural, and I want to focus on the urban. We formed a ditch committee among ourselves, councillors. We were very excited about that, believe it or not, because it's been an ongoing problem. There are urban areas that have ditches instead of stormwater management. And the amount of money that's been put into it is just over $1 million. I'm a little concerned about that because in my own ward, and I know that other wards have them, there's at least 3 main areas that have a significant number of urban ditches, like whole neighborhoods. And we have a backlog of work because it's not been a topic of interest and it hasn't been dealt with for a long time. So I just want to know, how are we going to accomplish getting everything up to speed, especially with higher volumes of water, major rainfalls coming. This has been happening more and more with climate change. So I'm very concerned about keeping up. I know we've got a project coming up in my ward in Crystal Beach, or Lakeview, actually, Lakeview part of Crystal Beach. And I'm really happy about that. But I just want to know, is this going to be enough? And is this every year? Is this for how many years? But it's a biggie. And we have to get on top of it because it's getting worse. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for that question. So I think one of the first things I will say is the allocation to the for the urban funding is really based on a per kilometer metric. So, and that per kilometer metric is the same that as we've used for the rural allocation. So in the rural area, there's close to about 6,000 kilometers of ditch, and in the urban area, close to about 1,400. Therefore, when we look at what we're sort of allocating in the urban area, it matches what we're allocating in the rural area, at least from the funds that we're collecting from the ditch levy. So the second thing I will say is that I think this is the first time that we are actually allocating very specific and dedicated funds towards urban ditching and rural ditching in general. So we do expect to see some kind of improvement in terms of the service that is being provided.
Yeah, and Chair, if I can, sorry, Councillor, if I can just add to Joseph's comments there. If you recall, in the 2025 budget, we did increase the ditching budget by 1.8 million. So that brought the base up to the existing 3.8. So now with the alignments through this rate structure review, the overall ditching budget now will be just above 5.8 million. So again, that's the new base budget that we're tracking towards. So again, significant investments in this budget and more to come. And that's something that we'll be working closely with Alana and his team on an annual basis, like we do with all services, in terms of, measuring the work, the requirements, and the funding to align it to what it should be.
Thank you, that's appreciated. And it's interesting metric you gave about the rural versus urban. And I can't speak for the rural, but in terms of the urban, it has a significant impact because it's more direct, it's closer to homes. And I'm hearing about basements flooded, and that's, and other issues because of the proximity of the ditches to homes. And when they back up, it's pretty problematic. So anyway, I appreciate the funding and the attention of this, and I hope to see more because I know that it's one of the ongoing issues that we've heard for many years, and it needs to catch up. Thank you.
Chair, maybe if I can add a bit of context also, is the $1 million that you're seeing is from an operating perspective in terms of the ongoing kind of isolated maintenance that we would be doing on the ditches. It doesn't account for the investments that our infrastructure colleagues would be doing in terms of reestablishing, for example, drainage systems in communities that are a lot more extensive in terms of the planning and also the work to be undertaken. So I wouldn't want you to be left with the impression that the only thing that is being invested is $1 million in urban areas. It's actually, it could be more than that.
I look forward to seeing the amount. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lowe.
Thanks very much. My first question is, it sort of builds on the ditch maintenance for more urban areas. So I guess that includes, roads through the Greenbelt, like ditches on the side of Prince of Wales and the side of Greenbank, for example. What does that maintenance entail? Like what do we do normally? I'm not familiar with what's done in the rural areas, so this is kind of new to me.
So Chair, basically in the rural areas, it's predominantly two things. It's basically the excavation of the ditches to be able to reestablish proper grades for drainage. It could also improve or involve brushing, where we have basically ditches that are kind of getting overgrown, and that we need to reestablish basically a workable ditch so that we're then able to maintain it.
Okay. Thanks very much. My next question then it deals with one of the delegations had mentioned impervious surfaces, and I guess this is obviously relevant to the properties where the exact measurements are done. Yeah, can you describe that assessment process, like more in depth, and also what that appeals process might look like that I touched on?
Thank you, Chair. So the aerial process, the capture of impervious surface will be done through aerial photography. We do aerial photography every year through our flyovers, so that's not new. The new part that we will be adding on to that is identifying pervious and impervious areas. Once we roll this out, there will be a web portal online where each and every property owner can actually go in and view their property and see how much has been captured as pervious and impervious area. And within that portal, there will be a dispute mechanism. So there will be a map, there will be an amount that you'll be able to see that has been layered on, that's been calculated as impervious and versus pervious. And there will be a charge that is allocated to that, and there will be an opportunity for you to dispute it right there online. So.
Thank you. And so all of this data will be, I guess, uploaded to this portal before the go live date of this new billing system.
Correct, that is correct. So as part of our Q1 2027 communication plan, we do plan to have that data up and available for residents to start looking at, especially those that are going to be charged on a per square meter basis.
Okay, and would there be consideration? I know the delegation had mentioned things like solar panels, which look impervious and, you know, arguably are, but underneath, you know, they're sort of off the ground, right? So are there considerations included? Could there be considerations included that that can maybe address that concern?
Yes, so we do have considerations for solar panels. Solar panels will not be considered impervious for purposes of stormwater billing. And as new technologies come up, we will have a process in terms of reviewing what they look like, working very, very closely. And actually, our impervious list that we've created has been working very, very closely with our stormwater engineers.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cheney.
Great, thank you, and thanks, Joseph and team. I really am impressed with the presentation. We get lots of presentations, and usually it's always, oh, we're going to increase costs. So just to be absolutely clear, we're decreasing residential water rates, correct?
Chair, residential properties as a result of this rate review will see a modest 2% decrease.
Yeah, wow. Okay, there's not much more to say on this one. Thank you for the hard work on this.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation and for the very exciting shift in how we're handling this. Particular, I'm enthusiastic with the changes being brought forward on stormwater management. I just have one. I have several questions, but I've one question about my ward specifically. So as I understand it, in the new system, we've got rates and processes in place for urban and rates and processes in place for rural. So my ward, and I'm sure several others, but my ward has entire neighborhoods that are on well and septic. So would there be a way of providing that kind of nuanced application of rates for those kind of properties that are not on water, stormwater, but they live within an urban ward?
Chair, just to make sure I understand, so properties that are within the urban area for purposes of stormwater will be charged based on impervious area if they are non-residential. If for purposes of water and wastewater, if they don't receive any water or wastewater services from the city, then there is no bill for them to get.
Certainly no negative impact to them. Thank you very much for clarifying that. I think I want to follow up on, I believe Councillor Kavanaugh asked this, and I think Mr. Gontier, you responded to it, but if we've got put aside a $1.045 million budget for ditch maintenance in urban wards, of course, that does not include any of the capital investments on any of the number of ditch restoration projects that might be happening in College Ward, in my ward. Those are separate envelopes of funding.
Chair, that's correct. And the analogy I would use here is as we work with our colleagues in infrastructure, if it's the analogy to a road is basically we'll fix the potholes, we'll keep the road safe, but then when it requires major renewal, then our infrastructure colleagues would be stepping in at that point.
Great, thank you. And then my last question. So the delegate from Cafes was talking about pervious versus impervious, and I just want to, I very much appreciate the changes that are being brought to the non-residential properties, particularly as incentives for those, let's say, those large commercial developers to come up with a different form of hardscape and then go through an appeal process and so see their rate decline. And I know that Angela had been talking about, the prospect of providing stormwater credits for developers who might want to provide, better forms of on-site stormwater management through more pervious surfaces. And I just want to clarify, because with regards to in residential, one thing that I'm certainly inclined to support, I think it's great that we provide better tools and subsidies for private single residences to make their homes less pervious. But when it comes to new subdivisions and developers who might want to carve out tracts of lands and put in new subdivisions, they're going to be responsible for putting in place all of the road infrastructure within their property. Do these kinds of incentives apply to them as well, so that if the roads that they put in place within their subdivisions, if they can demonstrate that that infrastructure is more pervious, would this kind of incentivization apply to them as well?
Chair, I guess it would all depend if those roads are private roads or city-owned roads. If there are private roads, yes, that rate would apply. If they sort of would make those pervious roads, then yes, they would see some credits come their way.
And if those are public roads, because any builder, whether it's for a subdivision, they have to demonstrate a certain amount of stormwater management assets to manage the stormwater on that property. But if they can demonstrate that what they are putting in place for those public roads, if that creates less draw on the underlying water infrastructure, could the use of that product count towards whatever that stormwater credit might be, so that they don't necessarily have to build, let's say, a stormwater pond?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a number of factors at play in dividing a new subdivision. Approvals under the Planning Act and a long list of things that are required through our official plan, master drainage plans, environmental management plans, etc. And so the short answer is yes. If a developer were going to propose an alternate pavement that served a stormwater management purpose, that could be taken into account of their overall plan for the subdivision in meeting the requirements for their approval. Excuse me.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ketz.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't have any questions on the water rate. I just wanted to take a quick moment to acknowledge how far we've come on this file, especially with respect to what's being recommended for the rural area. There's definitely a strong reaction from rural residents and councillors to what was initially proposed. And as you know, the in-person meetings are very passionate and heated at times, but I think where we ended up shows we really listened to that feedback and went back to the drawing board, so to speak. And where we've landed with a made in Ottawa solution, I think is palatable and respects the uniqueness of our rural area. It was helpful that these conversations were taking place during the Rural Summit, gave us, an opportunity to really engage with our residents. And the rural team of councillors, as we try to do, really consolidated that feedback and worked together towards a solution. But I especially wanted to thank Chair Brown for his leadership on this file. I know you were instrumental in providing input into these final recommendations, and I just want to say your hard work has not gone unnoticed. So kudos to staff and the team. I will be supporting this. And I know that water rate review is the main event today, but just quickly, on the bulk fill locations pilot, I understand that's ongoing and that the results will be reviewed and recommendations are to come at a later date. But is the goal to move away from allowing hydrants in communities to be used in favor of these centralized bulk fill locations?
Mr. Chair, that is exactly what we're reviewing as part of the pilot. Is currently there are hydrants that are identified as being utilized for bulk filling. All other hydrants should not be utilized for that. But this will also take a look at how do we prevent unauthorized usage. So that would be part of the goal, Mr. Chair.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say I definitely support us moving in that direction. I have a hydrant that's, on a residential street that's very disruptive to the community. And so I also think that there's problems with our system, and I think there's likely water that's being unaccounted for. So I support moving towards out of communities and towards centralized locations. So I wanted to provide that input. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Just a few comments from me, colleagues. I want to say how pleased that I am that we've ended up in this position. I think this is likely one of the most common sense policies we've seen come forward, certainly in this term of council. And we're correcting errors that were made back at amalgamation in 2001, where the full cost of stormwater was put on your water rate bill. And what we're seeing today is that shift back to where we were prior to amalgamation. And I think that helps every area of the city. one theme that we hear, regardless of where we are in the city, is you don't want to be subsidizing a different part of the city. You want to make sure that your taxes and your fees are going towards the infrastructure in your community. And that's what we have here. We're going to ensure moving forward that each area of the city pays for the infrastructure they have, not the infrastructure they don't. I hope as we move forward with this, we start to see more work happening across the city, and particularly the rural area, where one of the most frequent requests is a simple ditch clean out or a culvert clean out to ensure drainage along a specific corridor. And it is challenging for rural councillors to continually have to say, I'm sorry, there's not the staff time or the money, the resources that exist. And I think by fixing this with the policy as it is coming from staff today, we're going to address some of those concerns. And so certainly a big thank you to staff for your hard work. As Councillor Kitts said, we heard very clearly from rural residents that they weren't happy with the status quo, and the policy that committee has in front of it today is certainly something that is not a one size fits all. And we heard that at the Rural Summit. We've heard it from other colleagues and residents across the city. So I'm extremely pleased to see it translate into the policy today. Having said that, the report recommendation is that the Joint Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee and Environment and Climate Change Committee recommend that Council approve revisions to the water, wastewater, and stormwater services rate structure as described in this report, and including the following recommendations from 1 to 12. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Thank you very much. Any in-camera items? No. Any notices of motion for a subsequent meeting? Not seeing any. Any inquiries? Seeing none. Any other business? Don't everyone speak up at once. I'll say that we're adjourned and our next meeting is to be determined. So thank you very much for coming today.
Thanks, Chair.